Textures are a fantastic way of adding extra depth to your images, and this month we're giving away a whole load of them that you can use to add to your pictures and turn an ordinary landscape like this into one that looks more like this. So here we can see it's added a little bit more colour and detail and really given it a kind of a bit of a fine art twist. So I'm going to show you how to do that using the provided start images. So I'll close this down and we'll head back to the original landscape image. So you need to open up your image into Photoshop or Elements just by going to File Open and finding the picture on your hard drive. And then you need to open up one of our texture images. So I've got one here. I'll hit Control or Command and A. That's Control on a PC or Command on a Mac. So I'm going to press Command and A because I'm using a Mac, and Control or Command and C to copy it. And then we'll go back to the landscape shot and hit Control or Command and V to paste it in. Now we need to blend the texture layer into the landscape image beneath, so we'll go to Window and make sure our layers are ticked, and then head over to the Layers panel. So we can see our two layers here. We've got the texture layer at the top and the landscape at the bottom, and it's this box here that we want, the one that says normal. That's our blending mode, so we'll give that a click. And then you can just choose one that you like the look of. It's definitely worth experimenting with different ones. Lighten, screen, overlay, soft light, hard light, they all tend to work really well. So I'm going to choose overlay. You can always change that at a later date, and then we can see that that has been blended in with the layer below, and we can change how that gets blended in a little bit. But first we're going to resize the texture so it fits this landscape image properly. So I'll hit Control or Command and T to put the texture layer into free transform mode, and then I'm just going to zoom out with Control or Command and minus so we can see a bit more of the surrounding image, and we can see that the bounding box is around the texture layer here. So I'm just going to hover my cursor over the outside edge of the texture and drag it around to rotate it, and then I can flip it so that it's taking up much more of the landscape space now, and I can actually drag it around until I find a space where it looks good. And this text is just full of like rust and gnarly colours and tones, so it just gives it a bit more bite. So I think it looks pretty good there, so I'll hit the tick to set it down. And now we're going to change how the texture is blended in to the layer below. So I'm going to hit Control or Command and L on the keyboard to bring up the Levels panel. And then these three sliders underneath the Levels histogram allow us to change the contrast of the active layer that we're working on. So we're working on the texture layer, so this is changing the contrast of that layer. We can just pull these around until we get the right amount of contrast that looks good for the shot. And I actually think that looks pretty good there, so I'll hit OK. Obviously it will change from image to image. The final thing that we need to do is erase some of the areas of the texture where perhaps it's just a little bit too overpowering, perhaps it's taking away the eye from the focal point. So I'll grab the eraser tool from the toolbox, make sure it's set to a soft round brush, and then maybe drag the opacity to about 20%. And then we can resize the brush with the square bracket key, so obviously this is way too big. I'll drop that down, and then we can just paint over the tree and the horizon there to bring back a bit of definition there. And you can even drop it down to say 3%, so it's a really low value with a larger brush size, and maybe just brush over the rest of the texture to knock that back just a little bit. And then the very last thing that you can do is head back over to the Layers panel and maybe play around with the overall layer opacity, which is currently at 100%. Obviously knocking that back will reduce how much of that texture comes through to the shot. So I'll just knock that back to maybe 80% just to make it a little bit more subtle. So there you go, that's everything you need to know about using the free textures with the magazine this month. So try them out now on your pictures.